Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our monthly FEDSA meetup. Tonight, we're very excited to have a talk by Dominic on an introduction to local first development. Before he gets into that, I'm just going to run us through our usual introduction, and that is to FEDSA. If it's your first time here, FEDSA is Front-End Development South Africa. We've been running for 13 years, and I'm trying to run a workshop, a meetup every month. So yeah, thanks for joining us tonight. Just a few things to get out of the way is that to thank our sponsors. First of all is NML, who's been sponsored us since the very beginning of FEDSA existing. And that's a software development company in Cape Town. And also IO Digital, who've been a long time sponsor of us and also run our partner organization, ZAPD, which is the product design meetups. Then we also have Code Capsules, which is like I always describe it as a local version of Netlify. They allow hosting on the edge and also based in Cape Town. Check them out if you need a space to host your next project. And all their servers and everything are located in South Africa, so you can get some nice advantages from that. They sponsor our workshops. And then CodeSpace Academy very kindly give us a space for all our workshops at their offices in Woodstock. Yeah, so those are the four sponsors. You know, without them, we wouldn't be able to bring you these events. So thanks very much for that. We've got a workshop coming up towards the end of the month. We haven't finalized the topic yet, but that will go out in the next week or so. So keep an eye out on Meetup for that. And that will be at CodeSpace on the 29th of June. But let's move on to tonight. So tonight's talk, an introduction to local first development. As I said, we're joined by Dominic. Very happy to have him here. And yeah, Dominic, I'm going to hand over to you to take it away. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Justin. And just a massive shout out to FEDSA for allowing the platform to share this talk. And yeah, thanks for organizing and making the contributions you do to front-end development and just development in general. So yeah, this is why we're here. An introduction to local first, a whole new world. My name is Dominic Bauer, and you can catch me on all of those links. And PowerSync is what I'm going to demo. And yeah, you can find it there. So who am I? I'm 31. I can't believe I can see the 3 there now. It feels like I was 20 for so long. But yeah, it's just getting older. Based in Cape Town. I'm a product engineer. I mean, that's just really a cool way of saying full stack engineer who cares about users. And I work on the PowerSync product. And what I really care about is giving users a great experience. And what kind of piqued that interest was the first time I got a MacBook. And it was the first time I got Apple, like an Apple product. And I used to be a massive Apple hater, unfortunately, back in the day. So I was without an iPhone for a very long time. But I feel like there's a DOM before that and a DOM after. And I realized, you know, how amazing it was. Everything worked. Everything that I thought it should do, it could do. I mean, obviously now I've reached some edge cases where it's not great or things like that. But, you know, it was the first time I'd experienced a great product where I was like, I would buy that again and again and again. And I'd have no regret. So yeah, that's kind of what I hope to build for people. Yeah, so that's just about me. Moving on to the presentation, I'd like to start off with a quote. So I very frequently get the question, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And that is a very interesting question. It's a very common one. I almost never get the question, what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And I submit to you that that second question is actually the more important of the two. And Jeff Bezos said this. I'm not going to go into this right now. It's something I'll circle back to a bit later. But just something I want you to keep in the back of your mind as this talk goes on. As with anything, I think it's important to first start with where we came from with regard to web. And we first started with a read-only website. So you'd have some kind of database and a server that would serve the data from that database to a browser. And how it would serve it is it would just serve the actual HTML to the browser. And then that's that is what would be displayed to you. So something like this, very basic, kind of bloggy. I was actually looking at some old websites, so Coca-Cola or McDonald's, and the only thing they had was like red and then the McDonald's logo, kind of, and I thought that was really cool, and it just shows you how far we've come. And then what people wanted to be able to do after that was to read and write or interact with the website. So we needed to have a bidirectional flow. So instead of just sending HTML down the server, we would allow users to submit forms. So in the form of an actual form tag. And that's how people could, for example, create a username and a password to sign up, or add their email to an email list. And then people wanted to be able to interact with the website. They didn't want to just do these basic interactions. And that's where JavaScript needed to be sent down with HTML to the browser. And this is just a very basic example, of course, of the counter. But you could think of it like dynamically showing or hiding something, and giving the user a better experience. And I mean, that's, at the end of the day, that's what we really want to do. And now we've moved on to performance. So that's where I submit we at the performance phase. So now you have your database, you have your server, and you generally will have a REST API that sends JSON to your JavaScript app, which probably is React or Svelte or Vue or some kind of server-side rendering app, which does JSON and HTML, some kind of optimized way of sending things through the wire, and then that gets served in the browser to the user. So something kind of like this, where you have your shadow DOM, and one specific part of the page will update dynamically, while you don't have to reload the entire page every time something changes. So I think that leads us to kind of the state we're in now, which is we're either waiting or crying. And what I mean by that is, you either have a loading spinner, and it loads and it loads and it loads, and you're in an internet cafe and it's loading, or you're doing some kind of optimistic UI and you're happy it's worked. Yay. Oh, no. Actually, it errored. And now you need to kind of explain this to your user after you just told them that the step they took or the thing they bought or whatever worked. And that's kind of the crying part, where you have to worry about all these edge cases and dealing with things that don't work. And then not only there, I'll kind of circle back to the subtitle, but we have persistent storage. So, some kind of hard drive or solid state drive or something like that, which then interacts with the database. So some kind of like MySQL or SQL Server, Postgres, something like that, to get the data from the persistent storage. Then you need to add that to your backend app. So in terms of, maybe a model or an entity or however you want to model your data from the database, which you then need to send through JSON via REST API to your JS app state, which is probably, like maybe Redux or something like that, which has some kind of in-memory key value store. And then you have to still send that information to your user. So I find it wild, so it's like same, but different. So you kind of have a tiger, but then you have this weird, crazy super tiger at the end, that you show the user. And it just, I think, something to think about in the stage we're at now, where we have, so many depictions of the same data. And like, is that really something we need to do all the time? So where we are in the current app model is, if it's not on the cloud, it didn't happen. So if your, let's say, Amazon RDS instance is down, the user can do nothing. If the user's internet's down, you can do nothing. If while the user was doing something, they go into a tunnel, it fails. And now they have to restart whatever they were doing or resubmit, or, if you haven't handled it well, it takes them back, and now they have to refill in everything that they filled in on the form. So this is where local first has started to gain a lot of traction. And the idea with this is actually flipping it on its head. So local storage is the truth. So the user's actual device, that's the truth. And the server is just where they back things up. And if you can load the app, the world is the user's oyster. So, they can, if they're under the ocean, in the sky, whatever, they'll be able to use the app. And that's kind of the vision for local first. Obviously, there'll be other cases where you can't always do this, and I'll touch on that a bit later. So this is where I think we may go. And like everything these days, just outsource our problems. So the idea would be you'd have your app, and as I think most of you are probably front-end developers, but you can focus on the app and then have some kind of local DB and a syncing service that deals with syncing whatever's on the local DB to the external DB. And a nice little side effect of that is that you have automatic collaboration in that, in terms of, because the syncing is happening, it will sync on all devices. So you'll have real-time streaming out of the box, which is quite cool. So yeah, just to reiterate, so read and write go to the local database first. So you could think of like SQLite or RealmDB or WebAssembly SQLite, which is on the browser now. And then the syncing service, you outsource all of that logic to them to handle keeping the local DB and the external DB in check. So this is just an example, very basic. The user clicks the counter, they're happy, it works. Actually, in the background, it failed. And then it had to be retried, and then it succeeded. And this is a very basic example, obviously. But the idea is that the user doesn't care, that the internet or the server was down or it failed or anything like that. The user just knows that it worked for them, and they didn't have to do anything again, which is great. So now I think it makes sense to demo PowerSync, which is one such service. And I'm just going to exit out of this. And you should be able to see this web browser. And this is actually a view of my my phone. And so this is just a React app. This has PowerSync, and it connects to a Supabase backend. So if people don't know what Supabase is, it's just an online Postgres storage facility. I mean, it can do quite a lot of other things. And the phone is using a Flutter app. So it's actually agnostic to what kind of platform you use. And it also connects to this Supabase backend. So just to give you an idea of kind of the real-time collaboration, so let's just go with test one here. Oh, sorry, I'm using the visor, and it obviously I have to show now. But as you can see there, the syncing automatically happened. And if I were to delete this on my phone, it will now sync there. And let me just say, show in Supabase. This all also automatically gets added to Supabase. So if I now add this on my phone, testing, sorry, my spelling's terrible. You will see it appear here when I click refresh. There you see, and it's there. So real-time collaboration out of the box. But now, if let's say I happen to go into a tunnel and I lose my internet connection on my phone, if I add something, so I'm just going to call this offline, this will create this offline, but nothing will happen here and nothing will happen here. And this, which is online, you can still carry on as if like nothing's happened. You can keep adding things. So let's say if I delete this and delete that, you'll now only see online once it refreshes. And now I come back out of the tunnel, I mean. Now I'm online. This will sync back. Just give it a few seconds. So the offline is now synced here, and you can see the sync happen on the phone. So I went offline and I came back online, and I could still use the app. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'll just kind of show you what's happening here in terms of not the network, sorry, the database. So here's the example database, and you can see. So this is WA SQLite. So it's not very pretty, but this is kind of the data that's being stored, and so that's being stored in the browser in memory, and then the same thing's happening on this Flutter app. It's just it's obviously not using WA SQLite. It's using the local. So in this case, it's a Flutter SQLite service, but the data is all on the phone, and the truth is happening on the phone or on the browser, and then it's syncing, and it can work offline. So if I now go back to my slides, why local first app architecture? So for app developers, it's simple state management, because you are now just interacting with your SQLite or RonDB or whatever local storage device you have. And that's it. You don't need to download something and then store it in your key value key store, and then transform the data because it's not in the format that you want. Simplified backend. So with that demo, I had no backend. There's actually no backend. Supabase is the backend. So Supabase handles the Postgres storage and the backend, and PowerSync it's basically the middleware between the app and Supabase, and it just keeps everything in sync, which is really cool. And because of that, you now don't have to worry about, what kind of backend service you use. Am I using what kind of EC2 instance do I need to use if you're using AWS? Do I need to worry about load balancing or any of that? You just outsource all of that, and the cost is therefore lower because you can outsource that to people who are focused on that, and then you can focus on developing your app. And for the end user, they get an instantly reactive UX out of the box, which is great. And then the apps work. So whether the server's offline or they're offline, it doesn't matter. For them, it still feels like everything is working. And what you get out of the box is real-time multi-user collaboration, which is really cool. So this is a really good fit for productivity apps. So journals, to-dos, writing, that kind of thing. File editing, so code, spreadsheets, slides, docs, and also collaboration. So, design, like Figma comes to mind or something like that. Games, if someone's playing chess, it's nice to have that real time, you can see their moves happening. What it's not a good fit for is money. So banks don't care about what's on your local database. If they say you have R1, you have R1. Yeah. And then e-commerce, they want the money now. If you click pay, they want that to reflect straight away. They don't want to wait and hope for the best. And the same with vehicles, so kind of Uber or delivery. They need the most up-to-date location, and you need the most up-to-date pricing, before you agree to the terms. So some other alternatives, so besides PowerSync, that are solving the problem a little bit differently. So there's Electric SQL, Auto Merge, and Replicache. I know mainly Electric SQL, and what they do is they're a bit more invasive. So they take over your Postgres DB and handle syncing by doing that. Auto Merge was started by Martin Kleckman. He wrote Designing Data-Intensive Applications, really cool. It's very similar to PowerSync. I haven't explored it too much, if I'm honest. And the same with Replicache. It's kind of a new kid on the block as well, but looks really cool. So that brings me to my prediction. So I think, as with everything, it's not going to be either or. It's going to be a combination. And I think what would be really good for everyone to think about is, where can I start implementing this? Where can I start thinking about local first? And I think profile pages is one really good example. When a user's trying to change their profile page, they don't have to interact with the server. They don't really care that it updates instantaneously. I mean, unless you're on Facebook or, you want to see something instantly happen with your profile picture. But generally, if you're on some random website with the profile page, it can happily be local first. Carts, I would argue, could be local first. I know a lot of people have a lot in their cart. My girlfriend, for example, that she only buys like a month or two later. So I feel like there's probably some kind of use for it there. I guess the only thing is you'd have to update the cart before purchase, to make sure the product's there or things are in sync. But I guess in the background, it would sync anyways. And then music. So if you're editing music or videos or those kind of things, that can all be local first. I guess it is in a sense, if you have it on your laptop. But if you're on the browser, that's something that it could be as well. So finally, to circle back to what is not going to change in 10 years. And I think users wanting instant feedback. I don't think that's ever going to change. I don't think anyone's ever going to want to see a loading spinner. We kind of bear with it, but the less we can have of it, the better. And then users wanting to always be able to use the app. There's nothing worse than you load your app. I mean, this has happened to me on my Capitec app so many times recently, and it's so painful, but it just doesn't work. Or it loads and then it crashes, and you just, why? Why is this happening? And also the network dropping. I feel like the network dropping is kind of with death and taxes. It will happen. It's just a matter of when. And even though we have Starlink and everything, coming to the fore with that, eventually the network will drop, and how your system reacts to that is really important. So yeah, that's kind of the talk in a nutshell. I try to keep it quite high level. I did not talk a lot about privacy or at all, but privacy is another big thing that local first can help with, because you can then decide, do you want this information to be synced up or not? So it does add a whole new avenue for dealing with privacy and having certain things private and other things public that's shared to an external service. And if you guys are interested, we are having a build day where we're actually going to go through building an app on Friday from 4 p.m. So yeah, I'll share the details in the chat. But yeah, feel free to join if you guys would like. And yeah, thanks a lot. And feel free to ask me any questions.
Thank you very much, Dominic. Yeah, we've got some questions coming in. The first one is like a 4-parter, so I'll put them on in each stage.
Myself.
Yeah. Yeah, this is from Adrian. So I have an application type question. Say you're building a collaborative virtual whiteboard. Okay, first scenario. User A draws a square, then user A goes offline. Okay. User B increases the size of the square. Then user A deletes the square, still offline. Then user A comes online. Got it?
Yes.
What is the result?
So that will depend on the so what will happen is the writes will come into the database, and it will have to decide, either it was like last write wins. So in that case, whatever A wrote will come online, and then that will be the last one. But if there's other, I think, cases where you can have a delete, and then if it was deleted, it will just overwrite everything else. So it kind of depends on what the conflict resolution has been decided by that specific database or service.
Yeah, I think this relates to that. What in the local first world, what would the merging strategy be?
So in the local first world, it's kind of similar to distributed systems, where certain things happen almost simultaneously, and you have to kind of conflict resolve that. So there's CRDTs which look at that. I'm definitely not an expert in that. I'll say that much. But the idea is that you kind of have to pick what kind of strategy you want to go with. So, for example, what PowerSync does is last write wins. So whatever comes in last, that will overwrite everything else. And that's a strategy that you can use, for example.
Right. What happens? Sorry, let me not jump in. Are there any other questions from people via the chat? Otherwise, I have a few. Anyway, okay, I'll just jump into it then. I mean, how do you deal with a really high concurrency environment where you might have? Does that cause performance implications? How might you deal with that? Lots of concurrent requests.
So it can, because we use the write ahead log, and if that becomes a lot, and then syncing that down, it can take a while. So we have reached bottleneck issues that we've tried to sort out, and we have improved it quite significantly. But yes, there are issues that come about, and you need to find like weird and wonderful ways to try and resolve those.
Yeah. You touched on privacy, but I have a question, I guess, sort of related around security. How do you ensure security and integrity of data if everything's in IndexedDB, and especially when you're doing that syncing, between local and remote?
So I think it would be like the service specific.
Mm-hmm.
So we are in, so from a PowerSync sense, I think we haven't looked at this deeply yet, but allowing things to be encrypted. So
Right.
you would encrypt it, and then you'd have a key, and then you would send it, and then you'd use that key on your server or backend to then take the data, and once it's synced, through your backend, it would then open. Yeah.
I imagine it's quite a tricky one to solve, because that, private keys have to sit outside of where you're storing. Yeah. Anyway, let's not get into those weeds, I think.
But it's definitely a valid problem. Yeah, definitely a valid problem.
A question from Enoch. What happens if the last write was an update and the previous one was a delete in a last write scenario? Is there a cache being kept? I guess, can you revert to a previously done action?
So from my understanding, and like I said, I'm not an expert in this, is that the last write, so if the last write was an update, then that would happen. So if the delete happened, but then the last write was an update, the update would happen above the delete. But I think you can set that though in your settings. But I'll have to double check that.
Okay, thanks, Enoch. How do you see local first this is a very generalized question. How do you see this all evolving? We went from a moment where we were having web apps with service worker and all that kind of stuff, but this is very different. It's kind of a next evolution in that kind of local first is very different to that. Service worker and all of that was very much like we're building for a networked environment, and now we have a fallback where here you're inverting that. So what kind of things do you think we can look forward to in these in the future, or things that you're working on at PowerSync?
So in terms of the future, I think we're going to move away from this centralized database as being the source of truth, and everyone, it will kind of be like you'll have databases at the edge. I guess that's a term I've been seeing a lot of, is so everyone will have like their own SQLite, and it'll all just be syncing to this thing in the background at all times. And I guess it's like the Lambdas, with functions just happening all the time. That's kind of where I see us moving to.
Yeah,
and from a PowerSync sense, I think it's going to allow people to focus more. So like I was saying there with being able to outsource to this service, for example, in the use case, you have Supabase and you have PowerSync, and once that's set up and you've set up your tables, that's it. The rest is all just focusing on the app, and then maybe here or there you might need to change something, but you don't ever need to write a REST API or anything like that. You just use Supabase to do that. So I think it will reduce the overhead of needing to understand as much as we do now and abstract a lot of that out.
Okay, great. Thanks. Just from Adrian, this is around Google Docs and Figma. I use Figma all day, pretty much. And there's this kind of infinite revisions feature that allows you to go anywhere within that and recover things. Is that something that you could easily kind of enable using something like PowerSync?
So we don't have that feature. That's more like a feature of CRDTs. I haven't actually explored that on our side, to be honest. But what they have is they have that write ahead log, and then they'll essentially have you could think of it like commits, and you can then go back each commit or each log entry. And that's how they have that infinite list, because the database has that list, and then it yeah, you have basically like a history of time, and then that's how they use. That's kind of what they do.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other questions from the chat? All right, I don't think so. In the meetup description, there's that local first. I think it's localfirst.dev. Is that right?
Yes.
You would recommend that
So
as
I
a
think
good
it's
resource?
yes,
Or
or
I may have gotten the
LoFi.
URL incorrect.
I'll just share it here. Sorry, let me just join the chat. Oh, sorry. So it's lofi.so, and that kind of is the main like resource for everything local first. There's also a Discord channel, and yeah, that's kind of where it's all going off at the moment. There was actually a recent conference, the first local first conference in Berlin.
Oh, interesting.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so you'll find all the information there. Let me just connect to this.
You can't post link. You can't post links in the chat. Only
okay.
I can.
Oh, okay.
So what is it? It's sorry, what did you say?
LoFi. So life.so. LoFi.so.
There we go. Like so. Cool. So yeah, check that out. Also check out PowerSync. I didn't know it was a Cape Town based, right?
So the founders, the founders actually were. So this is actually a spin-off from a company called Journey Apps. So Journey Apps was started in Stellies, and then the company got funding and went to America. So it's kind of like a hybrid. So South Africa and America, and
right.
yeah. So yeah, PowerSync's been battle tested now for 10 years. So it's kind of one of those. Oh, this actually is important for. So we do work with a lot of miners, and they have offline, where you in a mine now, and you need to be able to handle that kind of behavior. Yeah. So that's where I think the epiphany happened.
Great. Okay. If there are no other questions, I think we can end it there. Thank you so much, Dominic, for giving us your time. Very interesting. I definitely think something we all need to be keeping our eye on as we move into the future. And yeah, I mean, we've all experienced, horrific things with network issues and so on. So the more we can mitigate against that, I think often we don't spend enough time thinking about how performant what we do is, especially when we run it locally on our, MacBook M3s or whatever.
And everything works.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks very much. Check out lofi.so, check out PowerSync. And yeah, the video will be up on our YouTube channel as always, if you want to check it out. It would be really great. I mean, if people could just share it around amongst your networks, it helps us a lot if we get some sharing on that. And keep an eye out for the workshop that's going to be coming up on the 29th of June. Okay. All right. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.